So nothing was kind of happening except I was starting to feel a little few strange things, kind of psychically. And suddenly I really had to go to the bathroom. So at that point I realized I was a little wobbly. I sort of crawled a few feet and then managed to stand up and walk over to the bathroom. And suddenly I had to go to the bathroom really bad. So I was slightly embarrassed because the bathroom's not far away from people. They can hear what's happening. I had a huge number 2 purge. It was like the diarrhea from hell. It was just shot out like a, and I was surprised because I hadn't eaten much for a couple of days, you know. So, but I think it must have totally cleared liquids out of my lower intestines. But at the same time, while I was sitting on the toilet, I had been cold. I have to go back a little bit. I was really getting cold waiting for the ayahuasca to work. The room was kind of chilly, and we're lying on the floor, so I was, especially my legs were getting cold, and it was cold. But in the bathroom, right after I purged, suddenly my upper torso got really hot, really incredibly hot. I mean, so hot I had to sit there sort of with my head down, shaking, like, wow, what's happening? I've almost never felt the heat like that rise up, and I was sweating profusely. And so to go from that really being cold, and then 10 minutes later being hot, I knew something was happening with the ayahuasca in my body. And luckily, I sponged off the sweat. There's rolls of toilet paper all over the place so people can use them when they purge. And I got the sweat off my face, and then it felt so good to run cool water on my face in the sink. And I felt a lot better, you know. You always feel better after you do things, I guess, like that. So I went back, worked my way back to my place around the altar with a candle, and I was lying there for a little while. It must have been just a few minutes when I noticed the visuals started kicking in. I started, with my eyes closed, of course. They sort of came and go at first. They're what I've experienced before, even on LSD. They're like almost like wireframe, luminous shapes, but they're kind of 3-dimensional. They're like Calder mobiles or something out of glowing filaments. So that all these filament shapes would start to pass in front of my vision, although my eyes were closed. I can only surmise it might have been my pineal gland. They call it the third eye, but something was watching them and seeing them, and that was very interesting. And I thought, oh, here we go. So they started coming with more frequency and more intensity and more variety. You know, sometimes they were like undulating. I've seen diagrams of mathematical 3-dimensional charts of phase space calculations. Our radio frequency, like antenna 3-dimensional output diagrams, which are drawn line drawings. So these were like moving 3-dimensional, ever-changing areas of intense, different colors. There was no like solid plane or solid volume of color. They were all like wireframe things, but they were not rigid. They were changing. They were wiggling, sort of, and I got the real sense they were alive. Some sense. It was very fascinating, but they started coming more and more clear, and it was almost like I was looking down on it's hard to describe. There was just a large 3-dimensional area, almost like you were at the it's say Noah's Ark, the volume of Noah's Ark, but you were up in the middle above, and these things were sort of along the walls of the hull, looking down, almost like a bowl, but more of an oblong bowl, and they were very interesting. But then I started getting scared because And I realized much later, I think I understand why, but I started getting scared. So, like,
Wow.
I think fear is the
This is
snake in the
first.
garden. And I've gotten scared before with psychotropics, but what I realized was when I tried to look at one of them carefully, and they were quite crisp, these shapes that were moving and fascinating, almost like
Well defined.
um, I I started getting scared because I would try to look at a certain place on, say, the wall of the ark or whatever, or one of the patches. They were almost like some of them were patches that were so different in shape and pattern than others that were adjacent. I would try to look at one to get a better, just to see it, and I wouldn't be able to. In other words, what it was, I had no control over focusing my awareness. And I think that kind of panics you. There's this panic, psychological panic of losing control. Well, if you can't focus on something you're trying to focus on, I think that's what the basic fear was, and it's probably built into our programming of the meat brains to keep out of this area that has all these things going on and leave it alone normally. But anyway, that went on for a long time, and it seemed like for an hour or two, maybe. But no, maybe 30 minutes. Who knows? But suddenly, the I I instead of seeing like these shapes in a really super large bowl, like the hull of a large ark or something, I got the distinct feeling I was looking at my spinal cord in a way, because it was long, and I was looking from above, it seemed like it would be 5 or 6 inches above your spinal cord, but the spinal cord was lay open. You couldn't see any bones, and you could see right to the center, which was like a channel, but it was surrounded by these colored grid undulating things, and then something started at the top. Uh, uh, it was like manipulating it somehow. It was like, and these things look like almost like the when you look at them with a microscope on cannabis leaves and you see the resin, they look like a stalk with a little bulb on top. Well, these were like moving lines of these stalks, semi-translucent and very iridescent with balls on top, moving up and down my spine. And I got the feeling that they were adjusting these things were, it was similar to my previous experience with ayahuasca, where I thought they were nanobots manipulating and examining and then adjusting, reprogramming certain parts of my being. I really felt like, but this time I was not so scared as I was the previous time, because I realized the previous time at the end of the whole thing, thinking about it, that's why they call them plant medicine, because they actually do a healing on you. They actually tune you up. So I really felt like I was getting